From the Center for the Study and Teaching of Writing at The Ohio State University, this is Writers Talk. I'm Doug Dangler. Today I am joined in the studio by Kevin Bauer and Dan White. Dan is the editor-in-chief of OSU's student humor magazine, The Sundial, and Kevin is also a member of this as the
art director.
So the Sundial was an OSU institution from 1911 until 1994. It was revived this January by Kevin, Dan, and Nate Verone, the president of the Sundial, who is unable to be here tonight because he is out looking for humor topics for the Sundial. He is that dedicated to the Sundial. So among what I know, what can I say?
Lame. How lame.
What you hear from coming from this computer is one of the distinguished alumni of the magazine, of which there have been a number, such as James Thurber and Milton Caniff, and surprisingly, Goosebumps author R.L. Stine, or as he referred to himself when he edited the Sundial, Jovial Bob Stine, who joins us from his home in New York City. So welcome all to Writers Talk.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, sure. And thanks again. This is Mr. Stine's second appearance on Writers Talk. When he was here a couple of years ago, he was kind enough to talk to us then.
I think I watched that actually.
Excellent.
I saw that episode. Yeah.
You're the second person.
You were the one.
Yeah. So we'll start out. Dan and Kevin, tell me about how the Sundial was reborn. How did it get started? This incarnation.
Sure. Well, we started out. Kevin, myself, and Nate are all part of the improv team at school here, the 8th floor improv. Kevin's the president of that group. And we had a weekly humor column in the Lantern, the school newspaper. And every week we would kind of type up funny pieces, which would then usually get printed. But pretty much what happened was the Lantern kind of started. They kind of got rid of that, probably because we weren't getting very many of them up to them. So we decided we could either kind of quit it or we can just kind of start something else. So Nate Verone approached me with the idea. He said, I've kind of researched this, and we have this great tradition at Ohio State in the Sundial, which to a lot of us we hadn't heard about. And he was interested in reviving it, and I said I would be there to help him out. And so I've helped him when he's needed it, but for the most part it's been him kind of going back and getting it, and then obviously brought Kevin on as art director because he's a lot better at that type of stuff than either of us do. So.
Okay. So why did the Sundial cease publication in '94? Are either of you familiar with that?
I mean, have you seen the 94 issues or no?
We haven't gotten through to the 94 issues yet. Nate and I have actually been going in on Fridays to the university archives and going through all of the issues of the Sundial. We just finished out box 3, which takes us up right around to the Thurber years.
Oh.
So we're working our way through.
Okay.
You have a ways to go. Are you telling me there was Sundial in the 70s and 80s?
That I don't know for sure. What I did is.
So I think it was long.
Oh, okay.
It definitely came back in the 90s because there was, and it was, I think, and Mr. Stine had a really good point about this in an email he had said was they kind of switched, they actually teamed up with the Lantern, which I guess for anyone associated with the Sundial would be kind of like the biggest, the number one rule we would have would be not to do that, but because of the historical rivalry, excuse me. But and it was just like a pamphlet. It was literally like a piece of paper that they would stick in the Lantern like once a month. So I think it just...
Those magazines died out. You know, when I was in school in the 60s, every college had a humor magazine. There were dozens and dozens of them. And we used to see them all in the Sundial office. But during the Vietnam War, people started doing underground newspapers and other kind of underground type publications. And just about all the humor magazines died out. They were all pretty much gone by 1970, I think, including the Sundial.
Well, we'll blame Joe Blundo at the Columbus Dispatch for that bad information. You guys go back after because he did an article. That's where I was getting it from. Was it funded by OSU at the time, or was this something that arose later? The funding then it was always funded by itself, right?
It was funded by itself. OSU hated the Sundial. And especially the dean of students. There was a dean of students then. There was a dean of men. and a dean of women, and they would have done anything to get rid of it. The Sundial was like black sheep. It's like the black sheep of the campus, and they really hated it.
Why
did they hate it? But I understand that one of the things that happened is there was a person who was working on the Sundial who ran for president of student government, even though he was not technically able to do it.
I heard about that.
Yeah.
Believe me, they hated it long before I ran for student body president, long before that. Because I think it was irreverent. And it wasn't, these were not irreverent people. These were very unirreverent people and very conservative, very staid people who didn't appreciate the Sundial and the fact that it poked fun at just about everything.
I think that's actually a really interesting point, because that is a lot of why 8th Floor ended up ending that comedy column with the Lantern. They wanted very reverent humor. They wanted it to be very
reverent humor.
Yeah, which is
what is reverent humor?
Exactly.
We need some examples.
Be religious humor.
Like Bazooka Joe comics would probably classify as reverent humor, I guess. But
you guys weren't willing to wear the sweaters that high, the sweater necks?
No. Okay. I just don't have the body type for it. But so we ended up. It was just a lot of us found it really difficult to write a piece for the Lantern, because not only did it have to fit in that like the small allotted space they had for us, but also they wanted it to be focused on Ohio State themes and appropriate for Lantern publication.
Okay. Well, the Lantern occupies this unusual space because it's one of the few newspapers that I'm aware of that's funded by student papers funded by a university, which does put it into a strange category. Most of them are off campus, as I understand.
They are.
Yeah. This is the intel that I've gotten. But as you've seen already, my research staff is
not as accurate as perhaps it should be.
How is the Lantern these days? Is it good?
The Lantern is, I'd say it's on an upswing.
We used to read it every morning. I mean, we enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's definitely better than it was my freshman year in the fall of 2008. And they went through like a massive overhaul aesthetically last fall. And now it's actually really well designed, really well laid out.
Mm-hmm. And he's not saying that just because he wants that humor column back. He really
I don't want the humor column.
With so many humor outlets, from The Daily Show to The Onion to Seth Rogen movies, why now a print humor magazine? Why? What did you think? Okay, put all that aside, and we're going to bring back print.
Because I don't know Seth Rogen. If I would have known Seth Rogen, I probably would have contacted him for a movie role. But other than that, I think print magazines are a great outlet for that stuff. I mean, comedy's great because it can come in so many different forms, and seeing it and hearing it are two different things from reading it. And Nate and I talk about this a lot, how generally when you read something, you never get that big laugh like you may get watching someone perform, but a lot of it's more kind of internalized. You kind of take it in, and I think you can make more connections in your brain sometimes just seeing it on paper. It's kind of up to the reader to kind of imagine what's being put in place before them, which creates a challenge for the writers, which I think is a lot of fun and we welcome, is making sure that the way you write, because when you say something, and that's how it's going to be interpreted by everybody, but when you write, there's a lot of ways to interpret it. So that's kind of a puzzle that I'm sure Mr. Stine has probably had a lot of experience with as well, is figuring out how to word things or create them in such a way that the person reading it gets what you intended out of the piece.
Well, and you're right in the reader's head. You're not up on a screen somewhere. When they're reading what you wrote, you're right in their head. You can't get any closer.
Mm-hmm. So tell me about your writing processes. I'd like to talk to both of you and then talk to Mr. Stine about that to see how you create comedy. What's your method as the art designer?
As the art designer, yeah, I do also write for the magazine.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of a writing process, I usually find that I'll have an idea that will strike me and I'll think, all right, I can explore this. Like this would be something really fun to go more in depth with. And then usually I'll write out a draft, and in thinking about different ways that I could draft it out, kind of different ways I could get towards the punchline. The way it usually works is I'll get a completely different idea and then do that as a one-off, like just draft that out once, and then go through and put a lot more effort into the first idea I had. And then when I go through and present it to everyone at the meetings, the one-off that I wrote in the middle of the very well thought out piece goes over a lot better. So I think it's just whatever, maybe when I'm in the moment of writing comedy, just the spontaneous moment hits, and I find something that works.
So you don't believe in revision, is what you're getting at?
I do believe in revision. I think some of the pieces that I've written that I have gone over and over again, I think some of them still work, but the ones that people laugh out loud at or actually enjoy is another way to phrase it, tend to be the ones that I just wrote once off.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think, and Nate would agree with this, I'm sure Mr. Stine would agree with this, it's about, I think Simon Rich, who's a famous comedy writer who writes for SNL now, he was the editor of the Lampoon for a while, the Harvard Lampoon for a while. He said it's about quantity over quality, it's get as much out as you can. The important thing is to keep writing, and then, so kind of actually, I guess, the opposite of what Kevin goes through, which I guess it would kind of make sense, because he definitely approaches it from a more artistic standpoint. I'm more analytical, so, you know, get a lot out there, and then you revise them, and then the best ones kind of stick. So that's what I do. I usually, when I write a piece, it's usually up on my computer for a week or a week and a half, and I'm just tweaking little words here and there, and then just try and write as many as I can that way. And then usually I'll turn it in, and then we'll go over it as a group, and then we'll kind of pick out things that way. Because sometimes it's important to show other people, because you can get a different perspective. But that would be my thing, is quantity over quality.
And as the editor, you can demand that people find it humorous, right? You can say, that is the funniest joke, and we're going with it because I wrote it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's
Quantity over quality that's a great motto. Love that.
So now, when you were also the editor of the Sundial, right? You, Mr. Stine, you were the editor when you were Jovial Bob
Back
Stine.
in the Civil War days.
So how did you write comedy? What was your technique for it?
What do you mean? Do I have to go all the way back then? I just did a book series called Rotten School, 16 books, which is just humor for kids.
Okay.
About the rottenest school in the world. And so we don't have to go all the way back there. But I don't like to analyze comedy at all. Either you're funny or you're not. Some people are funny. Some people are anti-funny. And it's just, it's a mysterious thing.
Okay.
I only cared about being funny. I never cared about being scary. I never really wanted to terrify kids. That wasn't the point.
Now it comes out.
I didn't care about that. I always wanted to be funny. I wrote about 100 joke books first. And when I write a Goosebumps book, I treat every chapter ending as a punchline. I'm just thinking of funniness. It's there's some kind of shock. There's some kind of weird thing at the end, is a cliffhanger at the end of every chapter. And I see it as a punchline.
Okay. Well, tell me about your original incarnate. Well, maybe if we can stay back there just for 1 second. I'm curious about it seemed like it was a small shop. It's always been a small shop. Maybe it was a one-person shop when you were running the Sundial.
Oh, no. A big staff. No.
Oh, okay.
We had a very large office in the student union, the one that was just torn down on High Street.
Mm-hmm. Not as a result of the Sundial, we should point out.
No.
Yeah, no. Okay.
But where I spent most of my college days, I hardly went to class. I just stayed in that office. And we had a very large business staff. I had an art staff, had an advertising staff, 3 or 4 people who went out selling ads, had a business director. No, it was a very large staff. Had a lot of artists, a lot of freelance people who would come in and contribute cartoons and things. And we had a very big distribution staff. Because, we used to sell the Sundial in those days. We would take it to all the bookstores, and it would be on sale all over campus. And then we would set up a booth in the middle of the Oval, or 2 or 3 booths. And we would sell, on the day the magazine came out, we would then sell the magazine from the booth. And we had a very big sales staff. I mean, the thing is that in those days, we were all getting paid. I got so we wanted it to be as profitable as possible. As editor of the Sundial, I got 23% of the profits, which actually, after I graduated, paid my way to New York City.
Well, there's a lesson in that for you then. Are you getting 23%?
I'm actually in the hole right now from the Sundial. So, but
it's hard when you give it away. It's hard to collect that 23%.
Yeah, it's certainly a different kind of time now without it. I think the only humor magazine I can think of off the top of my head that still sells their magazine is the Harvard Lampoon, and like I said, that's kind of the pinnacle of college humor magazines. That's where most writers on TV come from. So they have kind of a national distribution as well. And to talk about that's one of Nate and I's goals, is to get to the point where we can have kind of a specialized, diversified staff like they had in the 60s. Right now, I think we have a total of about 15 people on staff, maybe 14. And so yeah, that's definitely a goal, is to get back to that point where we can have kind of Kevin, which we the only thing we really have right now broken up is art and kind of writing, and a lot of people cross over, and Kevin will take the artists and we'll kind of take the writers. And but yeah, I mean, in terms of like the advertising, the distribution, selling, all that stuff is kind of like me and Nate and Kevin. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely something we're hoping to expand upon.
Well, then you each get a third then. That's even better than the 23%.
Yeah,
you each get 33% of nothing.
Of nothing.
But, you know.
Ostensibly, yes.
So tell me, in my reading of the new Sundial, which we have here, with a baby on the front, it took me a minute to figure this out. Mm-hmm. It's a baby doing a keg stand.
That's right.
Yeah. So you announce off the bat that it's going to be respectful, reverent humor. And I was wondering, when you went through this, you didn't have any sort of restrictions on yourselves, it seems to me.
This is what I'm talking about when you say in writing, it's hard to capture that inflection, because like that joke in writing would have just read like a sentence. That's why it took us a few seconds.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry.
But no, that's very good. Yes, it is very reverent. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh my goodness, I didn't realize the latrine was on here. It's a joke on the lantern, so you're both going to jail. But tell me about the kinds of things when you were writing. Was there anything that you said, this is off limits, or we could really get into trouble for this, or things that you thought were just a bad idea to write about, or is it completely open and not having any limits for you?
I can say, because I was contacted by the art director, but I was also one of the first people they contacted to submit like a writing packet for if we wanted to be in this new future magazine. So off the bat, they being Nate and Dan, were insisting that we didn't limit ourselves in any way, shape, or form, and we just go for whatever we feel to be funny. So they tried to make sure there were no restrictions, and that really shines through in the final magazine, because there are a lot of edgy jokes. And I think after reading through it, I think there are only two things that I was really worried about, like if anyone would have any backlash towards the magazine. One of them is a non sequitur that's a suicide joke that Dan wrote. It's towards the back of the issue. And then the other one is something that I just thought was funny that we slipped into the rights page. But when I showed my dad the magazine, he was legitimately concerned that we would get the organization shut down for it. And it's just, if I can see the magazine.
Well, sure. Show me what you were concerned about so that we can really get you into trouble with the...
Well, if I call it out, no one else will, right? So we go through like the rights at the bottom, like the Sundial is published 3 times during the academic year by the Sundial Humor Magazine. A whole bunch of information on where to contact us and everything. Reproduction in any form without permission is strictly prohibited. The Sundial has never murdered any children. Which is just...
I didn't know that was in there.
Yeah.
Until just now that you said that. That must have been
But it's not true, right?
We don't do background checks,
right.
But I would assume no.
But no, you haven't. Well, that's good. At least not for the purposes of the magazine. Now, it should be pointed out that Mr. Stine has helped you with some of the startup costs.
Right. Yeah, absolutely, and we're very thankful for that.
Yeah.
And along those lines, I had sort of 2 questions. You've taken the liberty of distancing yourself legally from these reprobates here, I hope. But also, were you able to give them any other advice about writing the magazine? You said, here's something that really worked well for us, or anything along those lines.
I gave him one. I said, make it sexier. That's my advice.
The baby on the cover didn't really follow through.
There.
Yeah.
Look what you're competing against. You're competing against the Onion and all these other. It's gotta be sexier. That's what I told him.
Okay. No, Dan, you didn't take that.
I have to tell you, and I have to say now. I mean, no one asked me, but just how thrilled I am to see this magazine back after being gone for so long. And I love humor magazines. That's all. I was so lucky. I did a humor magazine called Bananas for 10 years. And it was I had the best time doing it. And I think it's a tragedy that you have this huge country, this enormous country, and there's no real national humor magazine. So anytime young people are interested in starting up this kind of thing, it's very exciting to me. And I'm just thrilled to see the thing back.
We appreciate that very much.
Okay.
Now, when you're working through the magazine and you've got it out now, what kind of responses have you gotten? That's a really great response. You showed it to your father?
Right.
He was legitimately concerned on the first page.
Right.
So how did he go? The second page. How did he go after that? What responses have you gotten?
He was impressed. He was really impressed by the magazine. And there are a lot of pieces that's not just like I'm proud of my son and what he did. I only have 2 or 3 written pieces in the actual first issue. Mm-hmm. But he was just really impressed by everything that everyone came up with, which I think is a testament because it takes a lot for my dad to actually laugh out loud at something.
Okay. So you stayed by him the entire time to watch how often he laughed out loud?
Oh, absolutely.
Good. What reactions have you gotten? And I didn't mean just from your immediate family, but
that's the only person.
Well, I actually have to say that's actually funny that you say that because I would say the most negative response I have gotten is from my mom. She's the only one that's kind of read it and said that she didn't think it was very funny. But beyond that, everyone's been pretty welcoming of it. She doesn't like swearing and stuff, so that I think that turns out. And I don't want to give the impression that this is a bunch of potty jokes because there is some, I think there's some very topical, some very intelligent humor in there. So, but yeah, I think overwhelmingly we've received a lot of email from even alumni in the area who have heard about it, which is great, and just other collaborators from other universities who have read it, and Facebook and Twitter we've had a lot of positive responses on. So. I think that the overwhelming response has been very positive.
No one's burned down the office.
Okay.
I think you guys are ahead of the game. No one's burned down the office. I think you guys are ahead of the game. I say I thought it was very funny, and I wouldn't even show it to my mother ever. I thought it was very funny, and I wouldn't even show it to my mother. When these guys emailed me and said, we're starting up the Sundial again, do you think you might be interested in putting up some money or something? And I said, I had only one question for them. I said, are you any good? That was my question.
That was, yeah. We have these emails.
Are you any good? And they sent me pages, and they were good.
We have these emails.
So it's great. It's a great thing.
Okay.
So it's great. It's a great thing.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
And that was so nerve-wracking, too, that email exchange, because I remember getting the call from Nate, and he was like, hey, we got a hold of R.L. Stine. He just says we have to prove we're good. And then it was just silent.
What if we were bad?
Can we do that?
Well, I think a funny story.
We were terrible.
Yeah.
When I did the magazine,
no.
we were horrible. We were totally unsophisticated.
No.
We didn't know what we were doing. Your stuff is much sharper than what we did back in the 60s. Much sharper. Much sharper than what we did back in the 60s. Much sharper.
I've always
Thank you
thought
very much.
that a baby doing a keg stand is a pretty sophisticated, sharp piece of humor.
I'm gonna have to go ahead and disagree respectfully with Mr. Stine. I've gone through the records. I went through them kind of pretty extensively over the summer, and the reason we contacted him, besides the fact, obviously, Goosebumps and everything, very famous author, was we did think the Sundial under his vision was the best Sundial we read. I mean, that's including the ones in the 90s, which were a little bit, not as edgy as it is now, but a little bit edgier. But even back to the 60s, Jovial Bob Stine's pieces, Stine's lines was one, especially that those were the only ones that consistently made us laugh and really impressed us to the point where Nate and I kind of said, after 40 years, that humor of any kind, let alone written humor, can hold up, says a lot about it. So I think at that time it was certainly the biggest commercial success was in that time, but also I think content-wise has held up.
Thank you very much. Thank you. You guys are definitely sick.
it's-
Thank you anyway. Thank you. You guys are definitely sick. Thank you anyway.
It was also it's worth noting that you're in New York City and James Thurber is still in town and you didn't contact him. So he's dead,
Okay.
but he's buried in
Okay,
town.
okay.
So I'm sorry, that was a little too conceptual.
we'll cut it in post.
So what do you
I think you would have been at the Humor Award Prize dinner?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't gonna question because I don't know, I don't want to look stupid on camera. But
Yeah, I have no fear of that.
I felt
don't know at the time.
very like scared when you said that because I thought he was, and I was like, he's gonna be really offended that we went to his dinner.
Yes.
And,
We actually have a guest in the theater. It's James Thurber.
yeah, come on,
James
in, bring
Thurber.
him out on the show right now.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, we would need an undertaker for that. Tell me about your hopes for this magazine. You said you want to make it self-sustaining. Then what? Is it something like your dreams would be take it? You've already got it online. You've got a Facebook page developed for it. Is there a website in the future? Is there a Tumblr site? What's next?
Yeah, we have a website coming out. We work with a group on campus to develop that. So we have a website coming out which will have all the content. The Facebook page right now is pretty great. If you just look up the Sundial Humor magazine, it's just a bunch of jokes, kind of like opening monologue in the magazine, just topical jokes from the news that we'll post every once in a while. But yeah, the vision is to be able to print 5 times a year as opposed to 3 times a year, which we're currently doing. And creatively, we have the ability to do that right now. We're just kind of restricted a little bit financially, so until we kind of start getting the advertisers along a little bit more, and they've been great so far. We already have some more interest this next issue than we had the previous one, and we've already sold the back cover. So I mean, it's the advertisers have been great, but as soon as we're able to kind of get that financial success, similar to what the Sundial experienced in the '60s, we're hoping to print 5 times a year.
Okay. And so you're still going to class, though. You haven't taken any pointers from Mr. Stine and stopped going?
Well,
No.
I think he made the right choice based on where he's at right now. I unfortunately do go to class because I'll probably end up showing my mom this video as well. So.
I also go to class.
Yeah.
Big mistake.
What was your
Major?
major again?
Yeah.
You didn't have to go to
My
class?
major was beer and
Stein.
hot dogs.
Yeah.
My major was beer and hot dogs.
Okay, good.
What it
We
was.
don't have that major anymore, not officially, but it's good to know what it was.
Major than that.
Okay.
Well, I'm a marketing major, so that's about as close as you can get to that.
We won't show this to any of your professors. And what's your
We didn't
major
have new
again?
media.
I'm new media.
New media? Oh, that's right. That's right.
We didn't have new media.
He doesn't think that's a real major.
Yeah.
I saw the eye roll there.
As far as I know, that isn't a real major, but I'll let it go this time. No, it is a real major, and I'm pleased to have somebody here who's going to be at McDonald's soon. Anyway, I'm kidding. I want to thank you, Mr. Stine, for coming here today,
I enjoyed
virtually,
it a lot.
talking
When
to
did we
us
start?
and talking to the young people
I
behind.
enjoyed it a lot. When do we start?
Thank you.
Looking forward to it.
Good, and thank you both for being here. And
Thanks for having us, and thanks for coming on, Mr. Stein. We appreciate it.
Sure. Then you can reach the Sundial magazine. Tomorrow we'll do this again.
All right.
You can reach the Sundial magazine at thesundialmagazine@gmail.com or facebook.com/sundial.
Yeah.
You'll
And
have that.
Can I just say you can pick up the magazine at the main magazine terminal at the High Street entrance of the Union. Is kind of our main hub, along with various.
The main magazine terminal? at
Yeah,
the-
you walk into the Union.
Oh, okay.
And there's like a bunch of magazines. The Lantern's there, E-Weekly's there.
Okay, you're right. 'Cause, being a new media person, you're introduced me to a concept magazines.
I understand. Yeah,
I don't
that's
have to do with that. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all very much. And from the Center for the Study and Teaching of Writing, this is Doug Dangler saying, keep writing.